Hi, and welcome to the first module of the ProQuest series on competitive intelligence for the non-CIer. This module is CI 101, what it is, what it isn't, and what a non-CIer can do. As a brief introduction, I'm Mary Ellen Bates. I'm a longtime business researcher and I do conduct secondary competitive intelligence research, but I am by no means a competitive intelligence professional myself. So I'm the sort of person for whom this series is designed. If you'd like more information about me, you can go to reluctant-entrepreneur.com, or you can always email me at mbates@batesinfo.com. So the first thing I'd like to emphasize in this module is that competitive intelligence is for everyone. I used to think that it was just something that large publicly held companies would do to keep an eye out on their big competitors. But the more I do competitive intelligence, the more I realize that every organization has competitors and needs to understand who they are. For example, a nonprofit organization has to compete with other organizations for money from donors and from grants. It doesn't just come in automatically. Every nonprofit is asking for money in a context in which they're competing with other worthy organizations. Government agencies also are competing with other agencies for tax dollars, and so they need to understand what other agencies are doing with the budget that they have and what needs are not being met and what the priorities are that they can address themselves better than their competitors. Likewise, universities have competitors. They're competing for students, they're competing for the top professors, they're competing for donor money from their alumni and from other donors, and their professors are competing for grants. So they're all looking at who else is out there doing the same sort of thing they're doing. And even associations are competing. They're competing for members with other organizations and with just the choice of no membership at all. They're also competing with other organizations for sponsorship money. So as you can see, a lot of organizations that aren't corporations still have competitors, are in competitive situations, and need to understand about their competitive environment. And in fact, even small organizations can use competitive intelligence for their own advantage by understanding what the larger players are doing. They can identify unmet needs, see where their customers are not happy in the larger organizations and how they can stay more agile than their competitors and provide services and products that their customers want and value. Competitive intelligence is trying to answer three questions in general. This is sort of the big picture on when you're doing CI. This is what you're answering. The first question is what, and that's what's the current situation? What's happening right now? We on the inside of our organization only have our own perspective. What do other people think is happening right now? That's the first question that you're answering usually, the what. Then you're answering the so what. Now that we've figured out what the current situation is, how does this matter to our organization? What's the most important thing? How will this affect us in strategic ways? And the final question is, now what? So now that we understand what the current situation is and why it matters to us, what do we do next? How can we anticipate change? How can we prepare for what's going to be coming down the pike for us? How can we take advantage of what we've learned through this competitive intelligence research? So those are the three questions in general that CI is trying to ask. What, so what, and now what? Remember that competitive intelligence is competitive, not just competitor. It's easy to just think that you need to keep an eye out on the three other organizations that are competing with your organization for revenue and customers and that sort of thing. But actually you're missing the bigger picture if that's all you look at. Instead, you need to look at the whole market, everybody who's potentially in your field, including what might be completely disruptive to your way of doing business. What's something that, if it came to pass, would completely turn upside down the way your organization provides value to your customers or clients? Likewise, you need to look globally as well as locally. Even if you see yourself as a local organization, because of the web, you are competing with other things out there all around the world, and you're affected by what goes on around the world. So be sure that you're looking beyond what your organization may see as its natural boundaries, because you're affected by more than just who your own stakeholders are. And finally, keep in mind, what aren't your competitors doing now? That's real intelligence. What are the products or services that the organizations around you are not doing? Why are they not doing that? Is that something that your organization might be wanting to go into? So again, it's looking at CI in a broader sense. It's way more than just what the competitors are doing, but it's everything else that would affect you and your organization. Competitive intelligence consists of a wide range of information, some of which is relevant to us as non-CIers, and some of it is primarily relevant to competitive intelligence professionals. So these are the kinds of information gathering activities that CI professionals do and that most info pros and other non-CI people don't, would be, for example, interviewing salespeople and finding out what your customers are saying about the competitors. So going out there and talking to people from the field. Or, for example, they talk to someone who went to a networking event to find out just the chit chat and the gossip that other people were mentioning, to see if there's an insight there, such as, for example, maybe your competitor just laid off their IT staff. That would tell you something about where they may be going. Or CI professionals will often attend or will task someone who is attending a trade show to look specifically and have conversations with exhibitors and other participants to get information that doesn't show up in the normal sources of public information and professional news. And CI professionals often look at internal numbers, your internal sales numbers, customer analytics, and that sort of thing. So those are the kinds of information. Much of this is primary, and often it's sort of soft information that CI professionals gather. This is not what I'm looking at for what info pros and other non-CIers do. What we'll be talking about is what CI looks like for a non-CI professional. So for info pros, competitive intelligence research might look like, for example, you might monitor your competitors' websites and once a week look at what changed over the past week. Are they positioning themselves differently? Do they have different kinds of customer testimonials on the front page? Is there something that they're doing that might indicate a change in strategic policy? So this is the sort of thing where we can identify what might be useful information, figure out how to monitor it, and then figure out how to make sense out of it and convey that insight to our clients. Another type of CI research for info pros is where you do a search online to find a transcript of a speech that an executive gave at a conference or a meeting of investors or another setting where a news organization recorded the presentation and made a transcript available. You might want to look for those because that kind of off-the-cuff conversations can often yield unexpected insights. Another kind of information that info pros look for in a CI context is reading trade journal articles and looking for unexpected technology developments, something that would completely change how your clients use your product or service, or how they think about your organization or think about the need that your organization is meeting. You're filling in a mosaic when you're doing competitive intelligence research. So you're finding lots of different pieces and figuring out how they might be put together to make a picture that makes some sense. For example, if you're doing some competitive intelligence analysis on an organization, the sorts of mosaic pieces that you might be looking for. First, you'll be looking at who is leading the organization and how they're leading it. So you'll look at the people who are, who the leadership is, where they came from, what their background is, what the corporate culture is. Is it very informal? Is it very structured? What kind of decision-making policies do they have? What kind of management structure do they have? Are they very hierarchical? Are they very flat? Are they very distributed or centralized? These things all help you understand just how the organization thinks as an entity. The next thing you want to look at is how the organization is operating. So that includes seeing what they say about their strategic direction, what they say in interviews and in articles where people are quoted. Look at what's their current range of product and services. How's that changed over time? How are they marketing those products and services? What's their pricing strategy if it's an organization that sells something to the public, obviously? What are their finances, as much as you can discern from what they're disclosing? And then finally, you need to figure out what this organization's stakeholders care about. So when you're looking at an organization, you'll look at their supply chain. What are they depending on? Are they counting on materials from an unstable region of the world, for example? What's their client base? Is it sensitive to particular stresses or changes in the environment? What's their employee base like? What kind of people do they hire? Are they outsourcing more? Are they hiring more or fewer? What's the regulatory environment today? What are the kinds of things that regulators are or are not looking at these days for an organization? And how does that affect their strategic direction? And the et cetera is for anything else that's relevant to a particular organization. But this is sort of the general picture on how you would want to identify who's leading the organization, how they're operating, and what their stakeholders care about. Likewise, if you're researching a trend or an issue, you'll want to look beyond just that trend to think about things like all the stuff that influences the players involved. So that's the regulatory environment, again, the international markets, what the economic forecasts are, what the affected people here are expecting for the next 12 to 18 months, scanning recent patents in the field to see who the new players are and that sort of thing. Again, it's looking creatively at where are there interesting signals that might tell me something about this trend beyond just the most obvious places to go. Remember that presentation really matters when you're doing competitive intelligence research. Remember that you're pulling together a lot of different kinds of pieces of information. And sometimes what you find isn't as much as what your clients wanted or expected or were hoping for. So you really need to make sure that they understand the story that you're telling. You need to help them connect the dots by giving them clearly organized information so that they can see why it all matters. Don't do a data dump. Don't just give them a pile of stuff. Make sure that you help them understand what it all means. Format indicates value, which in this context means make sure that your format indicates the value of the information that you're providing. Sometimes you don't find as much as what your client was hoping for, so you need to make sure that they understand the significance of not only what you did find, but what you didn't find. Whatever tools you can use to indicate value and to bring more insight is really important. So use data visualization tools. Make sure that you break out the key points into bullet points. Write a short summary that introduces the information and kind of frames it and gives it some context. In other words, make it friendly and easy for your client to take in the information and understand the story. For competitive intelligence research, it really helps to be proactive and start talking to the people who may need your services early on in the process. So you need to identify who your competitive intelligence clients are within your organization. Find out from them, have some conversations with them, and ask them what it is that keeps them awake at night. What do they worry about? What are the things, what are the uncertainties that they're living with all the time? You're not asking them these questions to solve a particular problem, but to just get a sense of what should I be monitoring for these people? What are the areas that they're concerned about? Where are their blank spots where I might be able to fill in some insight here? So listen to what they say and think about how you might be able to develop something that would be really useful for them. Make sure that you attend meetings of new teams or project groups when they're beginning their activity, because here's the deal. Often people don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to ask an InfoPro for because they have no idea what we could provide. So if you can attend these meetings and just sitting in the back and observing so that you can hear what they're planning, it can help you identify what it is they need. As you attend these meetings, you'll be able to identify the kinds of data that would be insightful for this group, again, that they might not even know to ask you for. And this could be anything. So it might be average call center hold times, or an insurance company's claims to premiums ratio, or a retail company's sales per square foot. What's the information that you could bring in from the outside world that this project or team doesn't even know to ask you for? Your goal after attending these meetings is to be able to propose to them something that they say, oh my gosh, you could find that, we had no idea. Again, they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what they can ask you for. So as you're proactively staying on top of what they need, you'll be able to offer them the information that they actually need to accomplish what they need to do. And this is a good point to remind you that competitive intelligence research can always be done ethically. There is never a need to do anything illegal when you're conducting competitive intelligence research. If information wasn't obtained from a public source, you don't need to use it. If you can find it in a published source, that's great. If it's some shady organization that you find in the dark corners of the web that, they say they got it from some source who won't disclose who they are, you probably aren't interested in something like that. If it's something that you're being asked to find that you know is company confidential to the other organization, you don't want that. You want to stay away from anything that you know is not appropriate for you to be using. I think really what it boils down to is don't do something if you wouldn't want your CEO and all of your competitors to know about whatever it was that you were doing. SCIP, the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals Organization, has a nice, clear code of ethics at this URL, and I would encourage you to look at the code of ethics. Here it is right now, and show this to your management and to your general counsel's office, and find out if for your organization you have other restrictions on what you can do, but I would at least at a minimum make sure that you and everybody within the information center complies with the SCIP code of ethics, because these are clear and practical ways to make sure that everything that you find is compliant with ethical behavior. So, what are the next steps for putting into practice what you've learned in this module? Here are the steps. The first thing that you need to do is look around within your organization and identify who is already doing competitive intelligence. They may not have CI in their name, but they're people who are doing strategic planning. They're looking at the outside world and figuring out how that matters to your organization and what decisions should be made based on what they learned. Those are the people you're looking for. So find 3 or 4 of them, and then conduct some informational interviews with them. And these are open-ended questions, not a sales pitch about the information center or your information services, but just open-ended questions to find out how these people gather information, what they do with information, and what they wish they could find that they don't have now. This isn't a sales pitch. This is just finding out how they think. How does information flow through them now? Then, based on what you've learned from those interviews, identify which of your existing services could be modified or enhanced that would better meet the needs of these CI type people. This is the scary part. Then you'll do some preliminary research on looking at your own organization from a competitive intelligence perspective. What you'll be looking at, and you'll just conduct some online research using your favorite online service or even open web sources if that's what you need to do. But the questions that you'll be answering are looking at in what contexts is your organization being mentioned, say over the last 6 months. When people are talking about your organization, what are they saying about it? What needs are they describing you meeting? Is it what you're expecting? Then look at what other organizations are often mentioned when your organization is also being mentioned. Who else is sort of in the same mind space as your organization? Then, again, from doing some preliminary research about your organization in the news, in the professional literature, think about what the biggest threats are that your industry observers identify in your field. What are the things that most people are saying that organizations like yours are facing right now? And yes, you're going to be making some assumptions here and connecting some dots. It's okay. It takes practice. You're not going to be perfect. But the whole point is to practice making these connections, connecting these dots when you're working with fairly familiar material. And then you'll become more comfortable doing that when you're looking at other organizations and bigger trends in industries. Then prepare a brief report of what you learned. You'll be showing these to the CI people that you interviewed. You'll want to include at least a 1-page summary of what you learned. Make sure that you avoid the TLDR syndrome. TLDR stands for too long, didn't read. You want to make sure that it's short and engaging enough that people won't immediately roll their eyes and say, I don't have time to read this. Look at how you can talk about the mosaic that you built about your organization as a story. How can you make what you learned interesting? What are the insights that you discovered that you want to share with the people that you're doing this research for? Then ask for feedback from the competitive intelligence clients that you interviewed earlier and ask them what they think. Just in general, say that you're just starting to develop new CI analysis services and you'd like to know whether this format is useful and meaningful for them, what they would like to see differently, how could it be organized differently. Just getting some feedback on what would be most useful, giving them something real to look at gets you much better, more reliable feedback on what they would like differently. So those are your steps for taking what you learned in this first module and putting it into practice. When you're starting your CI research, ProQuest Dialogue is a great place to go. It's built for searchers at all skill levels, and it has the content and workflow tools you need to be a skilled CI searcher in minutes. Contact ProQuest at customer@dialogue.com for more information or for a free trial.